In today's presentation, we will be talking about an anomaly detection technique, which is called isolation forest. The presentation will be based on the research paper Deep Isolation Forest for Anomaly Detection. The term isolation means separating an instance from the rest of the instances. Anomalies then are few and different, which makes them more susceptible to isolation than normal points. In this particular example, the three instances highlighted in red are considerably separated from the cluster in blue, so they will be considered isolation points. To make this problem more challenging, we will be adding more isolation points, forming a second cluster quite separated from the one in blue. Starting from the original data, we will form isolation trees first. According to the authors of the paper, contrary to existing methods where large sampling size is more desirable, this method works best when the sampling size is kept small. Because our example only has 60 instances, that will be our subsample size. Trees are constructed by recursively partitioning the given training set until instances are isolated. The recursion can also be stopped when the tree height reaches a specific value. The authors automatically select this height by the log base 2 of the subsampling size. The reason of growing trees up to a specific value is that we are only interested in data points that have shorter than average path lengths, as those points are more likely to be anomalies. First, we need to select randomly a feature. Also randomly, a split value is selected that will separate the instances into a left and right side. We continue doing these two steps, but before, we need to increase the height of the tree. Working with the left data, we once again randomly select a feature and a split value. We continue these steps under two conditions. Condition 1 is that we haven't reached the maximum height of the tree, and that the current data that we are analyzing consists of more than one instance. Otherwise, we already isolated the instance at that particular step. Let's fast forward the next two iterations. At this point, we see that we isolated that instance, so the height of this tree is equal to 4. Let's visualize what we have done so far, forming these trees by separating the data left and right. The number of partitions required to isolate a point is equivalent to the path length from the root node to a terminating node. Continuing with the right side, we can see that at the bottom we already isolated the point, so there's another tree there with height 4 for that particular instance. The next right partition will go through similar steps. Continuing with the left partition, we can see that this will generate longer paths, in other words, bigger trees. For this point, we can see that it only takes 2 partitions to isolate it, so the tree length here is 2. We can expect that the trees on the blue cluster will tend to be higher than the trees formed in the red cluster. Let's start this process all over again with the original data. In this case, our first partition isolated a point in the first step, therefore creating a very small tree. Because each partition is randomly generated, individual trees are generated with different sets of partitions. Averaging path lengths over a number of trees, we can see that the average path lengths converge when the number of trees increases. Then we can expect that anomalies are more susceptible to isolation and have shorter path lengths. An anomaly score is required. The difficulty in deriving such a score from h of x is that while the maximum possible height of the trees grows in the order of the total number of instances that we have, the average height grows logarithmically with respect to the total number of instances. Normalization of h of x by any of the above terms is either not bounded or cannot be directly compared. Because the formation of trees, as we have seen here, have an equivalent structure to binary search trees, this method borrows from the definition of the average path length in binary search trees that states that given a data set of n instances, the average path length is given by this expression, where h of I is the harmonic number and it can be estimated by, as C of n is the average of h of x given n, we use it to normalize h of x. The anomaly score S of an instant x is defined as the following, where E of h of x is the average of h of x from a collection of isolation trees. The relationship of the expected path length and the anomaly score is monotonic. If an instance has a score S much smaller than 0.5, it is quite safe to be regarded as a normal instance. On the other hand, for scores very close to 1, instances with these scores can definitely be considered anomalies. If all the instances return scores close to 0.5, then the entire sample does not really have any distinct anomalies. Here are the values of all the scores for all the instances in this example. Defining a threshold of 0.5 in the scores yield the following instances that are considered normal in blue and the anomalies in red. This is what we obtain when we raise the threshold to 0.55, and these are the results when we further increase the threshold to 0.6. Of the only two parameters that this method has, which is the subsampling size, we cannot really modify that. We have very few instances for this example. The other parameter is the number of trees. If you increase this value, instead of 50, that is the one that we're using here, to 100, you will still have the same result. So the question is, if you eliminate those anomalies detected in red and run the program again, will you be able to detect all the anomalies?